Hi, it's me, Imogen, and I figured since I finished reading The Waves recently and it impacted me a lot, it'd be a good time to try doing another book-related video. So I'm going to talk about The Waves. I guess it's like a book review of sorts. I don't know if I should call it that because that puts pressure on me to have it actually be like a review and not just meandering thoughts, which it probably will be, but whatever. I finished reading this a few weeks ago, and I didn't have any expectation of what it would be. I just knew it would be Virginia Woolf and stream of consciousness of a sort. And it was that, obviously. And I have to say, of everything I've read of hers, this has been the most profound. This has impacted me the most of anything I've read in a long time. In a very personal way. Like, reading this gave me the same feelings I had reading my favorite books when I was a child. Like, you know, once you graduate to actual novels, it felt like that. Or the better side of like children's literature, which doesn't really exist anymore. So I feel like I should talk about it. Her style of stream of consciousness in this book, I think, works incredibly well because the style is that it's focused on these 5 or 6 friends' mental states and thoughts throughout like their lifetimes, except it's not as coherent as literally like each section is, you know, this year and this year and this year throughout one event. It's like it just kind of flows, I guess, which relates to the name, The Waves. And it's kind of this like very beautifully written but incredibly sad pathway from just a moment in childhood to later adulthood and death. And the way that she really does a good job describing like childhood sadness and like internal tragedy, and then also the way it feels to be old and having your life leave you and there's nothing you can do about it, or choosing to end your life early, or accidentally having your life end early. So it obviously brings up all these existential feelings throughout. There's 3 or 4 male characters and 3 female, I think. Yes, there is 3 female characters. And I find it interesting to say that all of them had something. I mean, they're all gorgeously written, so they all resonate with me in some way, and I enjoyed them all, and there's reason for all of them, I think. I'd say of the women, both Susan and Rhoda were like the most impactful to me. At first, Susan is the most like emotionally tragic character. She feels so much and describes it to be too much. She describes it to be too much and feels, I mean, this might be my own interpretation, but you get the feeling that she wants her heart to be held and doesn't feel like it's possible. Whereas with Rhoda, she's not even thinking that much. She's like, she describes herself literally like going to bed and being suspended above the world, where she can then lose herself in her mind of like beautiful, gorgeous scenery and nature and no humans about anywhere. And she describes herself as being translucent a lot, which I think is really lovely and not written about very much at all. And it kind of like reading both her and Susan's segments especially kept feeling like a knife in my chest, because it just felt so profound and beautiful and awful and heartbreaking. And I felt like I was being like written, someone was writing how I felt my whole life in the most perfect way, which made me kind of emotional, I guess, especially because it's pretty sad. Not to out myself. it's just these feelings of alienation and a desire for love and companionship, but not having faith in either of those things at the same time. I think that's a theme that's throughout the book a lot, which I really, really love. The way that Woolf details the world around the characters and like weaves it in with the thoughts they're having that may or may not be related to the outside world, but makes you feel like you're like in their beating chest, is like completely intoxicating. For the men, I'd say they're less on a personal individual level as like touched me as much, but collectively they did, and each one definitely had set passages that spoke to me really heavily. Like there's a passage where Lewis, I think, describes being out somewhere and just describes the people around him and them eating food and being served food and how it's all kind of like a gross and off-putting, and he realizes how like strange and false it all seems, which he writes in a very angry way, and I really enjoyed that. With Rhoda as well, she describes when she can suspend herself in her own brain away from the world. It's then also so fragile because she then describes constantly people's questions and interruptions, and just their presence with her kind of crashes into that and knocks it all to dust, and she isn't able to ever cling on to that feeling for as long as she needs to feel right. And then later on in passing it mentions that she's killed herself, and it doesn't really go into detail, and it's just such a small thing. It's just like you're following this character's mind and then along with the others, and then it's like, and she decided to end her life midway, and I really loved the way she did that. Couldn't know exactly why she did it, obviously, especially with a book like this. It feels incredibly personal, but I really like it. I don't really know how to say why I do, but I definitely do. I think it says a lot about what life is like, you know. A suicide may just be like a drop in the ocean, you know. Maybe not everyone's going to even realize, or okay, that was way too depressing. Didn't mean to go there, but that's my take on it as a very sad, zoned out person. But yeah, everyone's mind just feels like this big labyrinth, no matter where they're from. You know, it describes their parents and their homes, and it's different for each character, but they're all still kind of feeling this like discontent inside themselves no matter what's happening in their lives. And it goes from like big tragedy, like their friend dying in like a kind of heroic way, and then you know, other tragedies like unrequited love and heartbreak and loneliness, and then smaller sweet things like Susan finding comfort in motherhood, or I don't know, I think Bernard gets a wife and kids. But then again, even with that, it's such a distant thing. Like he mentions it in passing, but the real significant thing is all the thoughts raging around his head constantly, which I really like. So I guess that's how I feel about the book, vaguely, roughly, to summarize. And yeah, I guess that's what I felt I needed to say. It's not very concise or clean or eloquent, but that's that. So thank you for watching, and I definitely recommend you read this if you like to be sad and think a lot. So thank you for watching. Bye.